Wow, what an honor to be able to share a little bit. My name's Chris, and hi Ben, and sure for I've not always been the lead pastor of the Vineyard Church in Wheeling. That kind of happened when I became an old guy. Before I was an old guy, I was a young guy, and so just a little bit about me so you know who's talking to you. I grew up in Wheeling, grew up in a ministry called Young Life. Anybody familiar with Young Life? And really loved Jesus and loved God, but went off to college, did my thing at college, moved back to Wheeling in 1994. How many people were alive in 1994? Yeah. 2. 3, excellent. And so came back to the Vineyard Church. We didn't own this building. This building wasn't here at the time. We met in the gymnasium over at Wheeling Country Day School, and it was the only contemporary church in the whole Ohio Valley at that point in time. And started attending here, had no intention of working for a church or being a pastor. Ended up one Sunday after church, the pastor at the time came up to me and a handful, there were probably 5 of us in our 20s in the church total, and came up to us outside. I could take you to where I was standing and said, "Hey, what's it going to take to reach your generation for Christ?" I was 24 at the time, 25 years old. And something went off inside my heart that was like a rocket. It was all I could think about. I always wanted to do some kind of ministry, never wanted to work for a church. So started volunteering, started a college ministry and a young adult ministry. So you guys are not the first generation of young adults to even meet in this place, or there's several generations that you stand on their shoulders, and there's a history there. But we started this young adult thing, and we started doing a coffee house up at West Liberty, and you guys know Matt Parsons, our worship arts guy with the beard? Yeah, Matt was, I think he was 19 at the time. He met, and we joined the worship team, and we played together, and I led worship, and it was a crazy time. Lots of really cool memories. Anyway, volunteered my way into a job. It was an accident, didn't want to work for the church, ended up working for the church on the condition that I didn't have to be a pastor. And that changed. And one of the things that I learned along the way is that when God wants to lead you into something, He's very gentle about it. And when it's time, you're ready. And I was ready. And so came on, after a couple of years, became a pastor. And then in 2010, 2011, became the lead pastor here and have been doing that ever since. Got a wife, Christy. Yeah, I know, it was almost a deal breaker. Chris and Christy, kind of cute, right? So when our son was born, we decided we were going to name him Christopher Joseph II, and then we named the rest of our kids George Foreman. So, just kidding. We had Joe. The reason we named him Christopher II was because we wanted to call him Deuce, which we do. And then we had a daughter. She's 14 years old, and we named her Kristen, or Josephine Kristen. So it's all just kind of Chris, some version of Chris, because we're weird that way. Anyway, they asked me to come and kick off this parables thing, and I'm going to ramble for a while. And I got 2 hours. Is that right, Gab? All right, good. So I want to start off with this idea, this thought. Everything you've been taught is wrong. Everything you've been told is wrong. Everything we've learned from our culture is wrong. Like if you study Jesus and what He teaches, just do the opposite of what the world is doing, and you're probably on the right track, right? He says, if you want to be great, be humble. If you want to find life, you lose your life. If you want to be free, forgive. This is the opposite of what our culture teaches us, and you can go right down the line. If you want to enjoy a full sex life, save it for marriage. Opposite of what culture says, right? And yet, if you follow Jesus for any period of time, what you will learn very quickly is He is absolutely right. Like if you will apply what He teaches you to do, what He teaches us to do, he was the smartest person to ever live, smartest words ever shared. A lot of it's counterintuitive, but it's right. So everything you have been taught by our world, by our culture, is wrong. And there's one message in particular that I want to focus on that I really feel like this may be the most destructive message that we have been taught that is completely wrong. And it's this. It's all about you. It's all about you. That's the message we hear over and over and over again. And it's not true. And that's the problem. It's not all about you. It's all about God. And the path to life is not pursuing life, but pursuing Him. And guys, your generation, I think, because of where we are in the technological revolution, and I'm not against technology, your generation is more impacted by this message than any other generation in history. This is not a new message. We can trace it all the way back to the Garden of Eden and the temptation of Eve. It's all about you. It's all that's what she was tempted with. But this became a message in our culture in the 1920s and the 1930s with the advent of modern public relations and marketing. And they figured out that they could message an entire population of people, an entire nation of people, and manipulate them into doing what they wanted them to do. And one of the things that they wanted them to do was to buy stuff. And the message that they used and that they continue to use to this day to sell us stuff is what? It's all about you. It's all about you. Now, the reason I say that this affects your generation more than any other is because you grew up with these things. I remember when this came out in 2007, I believe it was. They became pretty widespread by 2010. You guys grew up with one of these in your pocket. You grew up looking at this all the time. Now that message, it's all about you, hits your eyes between 4,000 and 10,000 times a day. That's the reality. You are marketed to with the message that it's all about you, probably about 10,000 times a day. We spend, your demographic spends 11 hours a day looking at a screen for recreational purposes. That doesn't count work or school. 11 hours a day. Now, some of you are less, some of you are more. That's a lot of marketing impressions that say it's all about you. And guys, it's not true. And then you throw comparison on top of that, and now you're comparing yourself to other people. It's all about me. They have more, they're better, they're whatever than I am. And the problem is when you buy into that message, either consciously, and so many people have bought into it, like, yeah, it's all about me. I'm going to pursue me. I'm going to do me. You do you, right? We say that. Or subconsciously. Maybe you're like, I know it's not all about me, but when you're impressed with that message over and over again, subconsciously, you begin to look at the world through that lens. If we're honest with ourselves, you'd say it's so. Well, the problem is when you buy into that message, you will become neurotic. All right? We look around and we see the suicide rate over the last 15 years, hockey stick up on the graph. We see the depression rate, hockey stick up on the graph. We see panic attacks, anxiety, depression, all off the charts because we are becoming a neurotic society because we have bought into this lie at such a level that it's all about us. Now, there are other factors, so it's not just this, but it's a lot this. Because we live through the lens of a lie. So you either become neurotic or you become sociopathic. Heard of narcissism? Narcissism is crazy land. Like, that's a psychological diagnosis. It's dangerous. So you're somewhere on that scale between neurotic and sociopathic, and this is the state of our society. Why? Because it's not true. And when you live a lie, you end up in bad places. It violates the fundamental law of human nature, the way God designed things to work. Jesus understood the way things were supposed to work. And he taught us very clearly, it's not about you. The truth is, life is not about you. Guys, so the way this works is when our expectations and our reality don't match up, it creates something in our minds called dissonance. And we become very discontented. Everything feels off kilter. And so when you believe that it's all about you, either subconsciously or consciously, but the reality is it's not. Nothing is at peace inside. The message of this world is it's all about you. The message of Jesus is it's all about God. And the most important decision you will ever make is which one of those statements you're going to live. The most important statement or question is which of those messages are you going to live? After my freshman year of college, I went to Shepherd College over in the Eastern Panhandle. Go Rams. So my first 2 years were over there. But after my freshman year, I went to a campus ministry week-long. It was right after school got out in the summertime. It was a week-long retreat. And I got out of the car. It was at a brand new Young Life camp, actually, called Lake Champion, New York. They had just purchased the place. And I got out of the car, and God just, this message in my heart. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, and I pray that you do if you haven't. But this message in my heart that started coming in was, and I don't even know that it had anything to do with what the speakers were talking about. It might have, I don't remember, but I just remember this powerful wrestling match like Jacob wrestled with God, where I felt like God was saying, Chris, I'm a part of your life. You know, I know you love me. I know that I'm there, but it's still about you. I want all of your life. I want you to make it about me. From this point on, I want it to be about me, not about you. Now, that was for my own good, but I wrestled with it because I'm like, God, well, if that's true, if I do that, you know, I lived faith most of my life, but if I do that limits some options. I got some things I want to do. I have some options I want to keep open. If I make it, I like it better with you kind of in the car, but me driving the car. And God was like, no. I need you to hand your life over to me. And I wrestled with it all week long. Missed all kinds of meetings, walking in the woods, talking to God. Like, God, I don't know. That's a big decision. He won. By the end of the week, I was like, I really do believe that your plans for my life are better than my plans for my life. And I don't understand it all, but I trust you. And I made that decision. Now, I will say I didn't get it perfect after that. I've made many mistakes since then. But I made that decision that week that it wasn't going to be about me. It was going to be about him. And it has changed everything about my life. All right. That brings us to, you're like, so what's the parable? Well, we're going to talk about the parable of the minas, and it's found in Luke chapter 19. If you have a Bible, I encourage you to open it up. And the story of the minas takes place, Jesus tells this story to illustrate a couple of points, but here's what's going on. This is year 3 of Jesus' ministry. He's on his way to Jerusalem, where he will be crucified. He's within a week of being crucified. He stops in this town 15 miles outside of Jerusalem called Jericho. And so he's in Jericho. You might have heard the story of Zacchaeus, the wee little man up in the tree. He has this interaction with Zacchaeus, and he's a tax collector, and Jesus, kind of ruffles the feathers of the religious people because he goes home to Zacchaeus' house, and they're having this conversation, and things are going on. And in the midst of this conversation, it says this in Luke 19, in verse 11, while they were listening to this, while they were listening to this conversation that's going on with Zacchaeus, Jesus went on to tell them a parable. because he was near Jerusalem, and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. This is really important. Jesus' disciples, most of the common people, thought at this point, Jesus has been at this for 3 years, they thought he was the Messiah. They were expecting the Messiah to come and rescue Israel. And so what they had in their mind that was about to happen is that Jesus was going to ride into Jerusalem here in a day or two, and he was going to kick some rear end. And he was going to kick the Romans out, and they were going to establish a kingdom, and he was going to be king, and his disciples were all going to have little kingdoms to rule, and they were going to have their thing. And this is what everybody was expecting and what they were hoping for, that this was going to happen. And Jesus tells this parable to set the record straight. It needed to be said before he goes into Jerusalem, because they needed to understand that what they were thinking wasn't what was about to happen. So we'll read on. I'm just going to read the whole passage and then we'll unpack it. This is what it says. He said, "A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then return. So he called 10 of his servants and he gave them 10 minas." Mina was an amount of money. "Put this money to work," he said, "until I come back." But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, "We don't want this man to be our king." He was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for his servants to whom he had given the money, in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, "Sir, your mina has earned 10 more. "Well done, good servant," his master replied. "Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. The second came and said, "Sir, your mina has earned 5 more. His master answered, "Take charge of 5 cities. Then another servant came and said, "Sir, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you're a hard man. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow." His master replied, "I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I'm a hard man, taking out what I did not put in and reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit, so that at least when I came back, I could have collected it with interest?" Then he said to those standing by, "Take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. "Sir," they said, "he already has 10. He replied, "I tell you that everyone who has will be given, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me." It's heavy, huh? After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead going up to Jerusalem. Jesus was like, okay, I'm getting ready to go to the cross. We need to get some things straight. And he doesn't mince any words with this. Now, the interesting thing about this parable, Myron said at the beginning that parables are made up stories to illustrate a point or two. I think this illustrates 2 points. This is not a made up story. Part of it is made up. But this is the only parable we know of based on a historical event that happened 20 years before in this same area. So 20 years before, Herod the Great, the king of this region, who was kind of a sub-king. So the Romans ruled, Caesar ruled this area, but they had all these little regional kings. And so Herod was the regional king. He dies. He's got 3 sons. He's got Herod Philip, Herod Antipas, and Herod Archelaus. All right, well, Herod Archelaus was a bad guy, and he was in charge of this region 20 years before, right? And so in order for him to become king, he had to travel to Rome to see Caesar to be appointed king and then come back. Well, the Jews didn't like him, so they sent a delegation on ahead to Caesar to tell him not to crown him as king, and he crowned him as king anyway, and he killed a bunch of people. I mean, he was a bad dude. He killed a couple of his teachers. He killed 40 children. He killed 3,000 people in an uprising. He killed the people who went ahead of him to say, we don't want him to be our king. He was just killing everybody. He was a bad guy. So that's Herod, and that's what this story is based on. So why is Jesus telling this story? It's pretty brutal, right? Bring him before me and kill him. The reason Jesus is telling this story is because he needs his disciples specifically to understand what's about to happen. Because it's nothing like what they envision. Right? They envision that they're going to get their own little kingdoms, and Jesus is going to be Jesus' right-hand man, and Jesus is going to kick the Romans out and all of that. What Jesus ends up doing is he goes into Rome, or he goes into Jerusalem. He is crucified a couple days later. He rises from the dead 3 days after that. He hangs around for 40 days, and then he leaves, and he goes up into heaven. And he says, before he leaves, he says, I'm putting the whole thing in your hands. You're in charge. Here's your mina. Here's your mina. Now, guys, the reason this applies to us is because we live in that same time. We're still between the time where Jesus left and Jesus comes back. And we've all been given minas. We've all been given some things to work with. Which brings me to the first point of this message, which is this: what you have is God's, not yours. What you have is God's, not yours. Every one of us has been given minas. And it's not money, although we do have money. We have talent, we have time, we have cars, we have stuff. What are you doing with your stuff? Are you treating it like it's yours, or are you treating it like it's God's? Are you leveraging it for you, or are you leveraging it for him? And we don't all get equal amounts. We have a mix, right? Some of us have more money than others. Some of us have more talent than others. Some of us have a bigger car than others. Some of us have more time than others. We all have a mix of these things, right? What are you doing with them? First of all, are you treating them like they're yours, or are you treating them like they're God's? One of the most significant moments in your walk with God is when you realize nothing that you have, including your talent, time, treasure, any of it, none of it's yours. It all belongs to God. When you make that switch up here, everything changes in your walk with God. Jesus is teaching them that. So my question for you is, how are you leveraging God's money? Like, I'm a college student, I don't have any money. Yeah, you buy pizzas, you got some money. How are you leveraging pizzas? How are you leveraging your talent? When you look at your life and where your life is going, is your talent primarily to enrich you or to invest in God's kingdom? And it doesn't mean you can't have a career, so don't hear me saying that, but primarily, what's your mindset on that? Is it for you or is it for him? Your time. And I know everybody says, I don't have any time. We spend 11 hours a day looking at devices. We have time. We have time. How about your car? When you come to the way, how many empty seats are in your car? Are you leveraging your car for God? Leverage your car. Treat it like it's his, not yours. And it's not how much you've been given. It's not the mix of gifts and things that he's given you. It's what you do with what you've been given. Using it for you or using it for him and understanding that it's his. We all have an equal opportunity to live for him. Second thing is this: God expects you to grow what you've been given for his kingdom. He expects you to grow. It's an expectation. In verse 15, it says, he was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money. So he comes back in order to find out what they had gained with it. The expectation is they had gained something with it. They had used what God had given them to increase God's kingdom for God. And God's expectation is we'll do well. He's betting on us. God believes in you more than you believe in you. He believes in you more than you believe in him. His expectation is you're going to crush it. And you know, he proved this by making you the plan. When he leaves, goes into heaven. Now I want you to go all over the world and expand the kingdom. Help people find me. Teach them how to follow me. Take what you have been given and use it for me. He bet it all on us. There is no plan B. And Jesus is coming back, and he's going to want to see what we did with what we were given. He's not expecting us to blow it. Point number 3. You have to choose your king. You have to choose your king. Who's your king? You're going to serve somebody. You know, we like to think, well, I could be the king. It's good to be king. Or God could be the king. But the reality is, and Jesus made this very clear, whenever you make yourself king, whenever you're the center of your universe, you end up serving something else. It never works out that way. You always end up you'll serve greed, you'll serve addiction, you'll serve something else. In verse 27, it says, "But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me." That's not warm, fuzzy Jesus, is it? But it makes sense. Like, if you don't want God to be king of your life in this life, why would you want to spend eternity with him as king of your life? I mean, God's desire is that every single human being on this planet would choose to make him king, would choose to follow him. But if we choose not to, it's our choice. Why would we want to spend eternity with him? And that's the question that I was wrestling with that after my freshman year of college. Does God get to be king, or is Chris going to be king? And that's the question I would ask you guys this evening. Is God going to be king, or are you going to be king? Because the answer to that question will determine not just the quality of your life in this life, but the quality of your eternity in the next. And the reality is, and the truth is, that God has a better plan for your life in this life than you do. He does. And he is just waiting for us to bow the knee and say, okay, God, I want what you want more than I want what I want. I want your plan more than mine. You get to be king, and we'll build your kingdom together. You know, when Jesus left, he sent his Spirit. He dies on the cross because there's a block between God's Spirit and all of humanity. It's called sin. Pays the price for sin so that it can be washed away. And then when he leaves, he goes, I'm going to send my Spirit. A few days later, he does. So that he can come and live in our lives, empower us, give us spiritual gifts. Those would be kind of minas as well. To use those to join him in changing this world, and changing this valley, and changing your campus. And his kingdom comes alive inside of us when we do that. This is why Jesus went to Jerusalem. Now, mental health pro tip. I know the last series was mental health, right? But I don't care. I'm the lead pastor. I can do whatever I want. You want to live the best life possible? Lose your life. You want to live the best life possible? You want to be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healthy? Wrestle with this passage, because this is the answer. It flies in the face of the lies that we have been sold, that it's all about us. It does, and it feels counterintuitive, but guys, it is so true. Jesus taught this in Matthew 10, verse 38, said, whoever does not take up their cross, you guys know what a cross was for? It was to kill people. Whoever does not die to themselves, is what Jesus is saying, and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. It's the upside down, inside out, backwards logic of Jesus that works. I remember there was a season in my life where I was like, I got to go find myself. Like, who am I? And was kind of bought that messaging that it's all about me. Got to go self-actualize. See, the secret is not finding yourself, it's losing yourself. Jesus in Luke 9:23 says the same thing. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Is that you or is that him? That's him. Die to ourselves, deny ourselves, follow him. He gets to be king. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Guys, this is the reason our world is so janky today. This is the reason that we have to do a series on mental health today. Because we're living out of the wrong story. We're living out of the wrong truth. It's not a truth. Whether we know it or not, we're living life like it's all about us. And as long as you do that, it's never going to make sense. You're never going to live fully. You're never going to know the life, the purpose, the meaning, and the blessing that you were created for. Don't go find yourself. Go lose yourself. Decide whose kingdom you're going to build. So I want to leave you with two questions. These are your two questions for this evening as you're talking afterwards or as you're praying before bed or whatever. But wrestle these to the ground. First question, and this is right out of this passage. Who's going to be the king of your life? Who's going to be the king of your life? You have to choose. And the second question is this: whose kingdom are you going to build? Once you decide who's going to be king, then you have to decide whose kingdom you're going to build. Most of us go through life, whether it's a career track or a college track or whatever it is, with the idea that I am building my kingdom because we bought the lie that it's all about me. And again, I'm not saying you can't have a career. I'm not saying you can't have nice things. I'm not saying you can't have a family. None of that. But primarily, what is your purpose in this world and whose kingdom are you building, yours or his? And if you will answer those two questions, it will completely change the trajectory of your life. But it will change your inner world. It will change the way you go through this life. And it will give you purpose and meaning and peace and power and God in ways that you can't even imagine. And here's last thought. You have to choose. Because you will not drift into these decisions. At some point, you have to decide. And guys, we live in interesting times. You know, we talked about the phone. Well, we didn't. I did. We talked about the fact that this has completely changed the way we are marketed to, the way we see the world. Everything is kind of through this lens in like 10 years. We have just crossed the AI barrier. You guys are all writing your papers now with AI, I think. We're going to see more change on a daily basis than we've seen in generations within the next 3 to 5 years. The technology that is going to be hitting you, that is full of temptation and full of distraction and full of pleasure, it's a pace like humanity has never seen before. And I'm not pessimistic about it and I'm not scared of it, but what I am saying is it will totally, if you do not decide, it will totally lead you off in a direction that you don't want to go. You have to decide who's going to be king and whose kingdom are you going to build. And those two questions will change everything. I'm going to leave you with this passage. Joshua 24:15. Joshua talking to the children of Israel. This is as true today as it was when he said it. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites, whether you're going to worship idols or technology or yourself. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Let's pray. Father, it's a hard word. Thank you that we have a choice. God, thank you that you're rooting for us, that you bet on us, that you believe in us. And God, thank you that you gave us the wisdom of Christ. God, that when we follow his teachings, it's the path to life. It's the path to blessing. It's the path to peace. God, that he shared these things not because he doesn't love us, but because he loves us so much. I pray that each person here would know that love personally. God, and would come to that place where they choose you as king and choose to build your kingdom over theirs. In Jesus' name, amen. I think we're going to sing a couple more songs, so if you guys want to stand up, I just encourage you as we sing these songs, wrestle with those two questions. Who gets to be king? And whose kingdom are you going to build? Talk to the Lord.